Nick Compton.
Hi, Carrie.
I am super honored and thrilled to be talking to you today on behalf of Contribute.to, and really wanted to just start with what's probably the most obvious question. And it's just, you've done elite sports your entire life to such a high level. And now you want to be an artist. Really?
Yeah, it's a strange one. It's not the normal route for a retired athlete, is it? I think I've just been, quite lucky in the sense that, one, I've been surrounded around some artists. My mum was an artist, and my dad spent a lot of time doing a lot of TV presenting and some photography in South Africa, where I grew up. So, I guess there's been a sort of visual art kind of representation around me since I grew up. And I think also in a kind of strange way, sports, being an athlete, is kind of an art in its own self. It's a very individual livelihood. It's an individual path and journey. And I think it's also about expressing yourself. There's no doubt being a sportsman is about taking that talent and making the most of it and working on that every single day. And I see a lot of similarities between that and art, and whether that be as a photographer or an artist trying to really express your drawing capabilities or fine art capabilities. I think it's the same sort of journey. And at school, there's no doubt that art was my favorite subject and something that I really wanted to pursue. But I had this burning ambition to follow in a grandfather's footsteps. I had a famous grandfather who played cricket for England and football for the Arsenal. So any football fans out there, hopefully they don't mind me saying that I am an Arsenal fan. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But look, I had a famous grandfather, Nick Compton, and I guess sport was very much in the family. So yes, I had this journey, which took me to England at the age of 15. It was a different journey in the sense that I left home at that age, and it was tough. But I think the ambition and the desire to try and do something special was always something that burned quite deep inside me. And now that I've retired, I guess in some ways there's been a re-identification process, trying to, I suppose, find myself in some ways. But photography is the one thing that I've always done, and something that I've been able to do on the multiple tours, traveling to different countries, the places like India, Sri Lanka, Australia, even coming back to South Africa. I mean, people will know that South Africa has a rich cultural history. And I grew up in a place called Durban, and Dad took me up to the bush and to different environments. I was around a lot of African people, and he had a real ability to connect with them, had an affinity for the underdog. And I think that's something that lives quite deep inside me. And since I retired, coming back to places like Africa, Kenya, Uganda, gives me that sense of being in touch again. And the camera has been my conduit to getting, very much in contact with people, making those connections and getting to parts that are parts of the world or this country that are kind of off the beaten track. And I think that's where you see the colors and you see the real raw parts of a place. So it's probably a strange journey in some ways, but it's very much symbolized my family upbringing and what really interests me. I'm fascinated by art, by creativity, and how people express themselves.
I guess the most obvious parallel too is, and you're probably just beginning to find this out, that being an artist is not easy. It takes a lot of grit and determination and focus on the thing that matters. What's it like for you starting out in the art world? You were, as we've said, you were this famous athlete for so long, and now you're kind of, you're at the beginning of a whole new career. Do you have to tap into that resilience that you had to have with sport?
I think you do. I think I'm learning that. Again, it's a journey, and it's a new one. There's no doubt that, as I said, there are some similarities. I think it's a singular journey. I think you have to navigate your own path, and very much like cricket and sport, I think you have to, find what your niche is, what it is that I'm very good at, and how can I enhance those strengths. I think I spent enough time, trying to emulate other professionals, looking up to heroes, trying to work out, where was I going to find my game and how was I going to fit into that system? And I think the same thing with photography and I suppose art. There's millions of great artists out there, lots of incredible photographers. And, there's no doubt that they give me inspiration every day. And I look at techniques and things that they do and try and draw upon them. But fundamentally, I've got to follow what burns inside me, what captures my eye, and why does it capture my eye? And I think that comes from my own emotional sort of, I guess my own emotional sense, what emotions am I drawn to and why, and what colors am I drawn to, and why is it that I take photos of specific things? And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to enhance my own strengths. And then, of course, once you've done that, I think it's trying to work out how to then navigate the fine art world, because, as you say, it is a new world, it is a new industry. It's very much a learning on the job type of sort of journey, I guess. But I'm quite confident that expressing yourself and using some of the attributes that hopefully I've gained on the sporting field and using the background of being a sportsman into photography, I think it is an interesting niche. I think there's a different backstory that might be different to some of the artists who, have gone at more sort of generic routes or gone through art college or fine art college. I've come from a slightly different background. I have, a lot of visual representation around me in terms of my family. But as you say, it isn't easy. There's no doubt that, a lot of humility is required to learn, to understand, and then to try and go forward and probably find my own niche and way forward. So
that then makes me think immediately of something that you do on a regular basis in this relatively short career you've had as a photographer. You've really put yourself in some incredibly difficult situations, both physically and I'm guessing emotionally, gorillas, bears in Alaska, climbing to the Everest base camp. Do you think you're taking yourself to the edge into these extreme environments? Or for you, is it like, no big deal?
In terms of what you said, I guess for others, it's quite extreme. And it's, gee, how did you feel when you did that? Or were you okay? Or how close did you get to those bears? Or, I spend a lot of time in slum areas and where most people would advise not going on your own. And for me, it has been something that I've probably found easier than most. Why? Not entirely sure. I think I probably go back to my father and his ability to interact with in places and with people that wouldn't be so common in terms of my demographic and my upbringing. And I think that was kind of ingrained in me in quite an early age. And I think South Africa also has a sense of freedom. Africa has a sense of freedom where perhaps it's not as regulated as being in countries like, the UK or in Europe or in Australia for that matter. So I think that's been very much a symptom of where I've grown up. But I think also having traveled abroad at the age of 15, left home, I think I've become, from a life perspective, quite independent quite early. And I also think that when you go to new countries and places, and I suppose as a sportsman, by and large, you stay in nice hotels. And if you want, you could be in any country for that matter. You stay in a 5-star hotel, you get in a nice luxury a bus, and you go to where you play your game, and then you come back again. And if you want, you could just go to the hotel restaurant and actually not really experience the country. And I sort of felt inside me was quite a traveler and quite an opportunist. And I may never have gone to Sri Lanka or India again. Who knows? So I wanted to make the most of that experience. I wanted to see the place I was in. I wanted to meet people at local coffee shops and find where the locals go and what this place is like to actually live, breathe, and smell. And I think it probably comes from an appetite of being quite inquisitive, and also a visual appetite. I like going to places that are cool, that have an edge to it. I like going to villages and parts of a country where it is real, it is raw. And yes, I guess with that comes a sense of, I suppose, a sense of danger in some ways, but I've never seen it like that. I just think that danger is something that we probably build up in ourselves. And sure, I probably, I don't want to be ignorant at the same time, but I feel that a lot of these places I've gone, I've had a completely the opposite interaction and experience. I feel like the people have been so friendly, so welcoming. I go in there with my hands open. I'm not here to threaten. I take pictures, hopefully, with an ability to, bring out the natural smiles or the natural entities of these people. You never want to take a picture of someone who's, kind of feeling uncomfortable, and I think that's a slight skill in itself. Anyone can take a camera out and take a picture, but I think being able to absorb yourself in that community, when you look back and you sort of think, gee, I had a really amazing experience with that family, or they warmed to me, and that gives me a sense of pride, not just put a picture on the wall, but also that interaction I had gives me a memory that I can remember and I can look back fondly on. So yes, ignorance is, there's a line between ignorance and having fun, but I think that's also where the sportsman and the athlete comes in as well. I want to, when I played, there was a sense of fear, there's a sense of courage. You're putting yourself out there in front of thousands of people, and you're trying to express something that comes from within. And I think the same with photography. I've got to find that own narrative in myself. I've got to go to places that excite me. There's no point in doing something that everyone else has done, or is just another generic photo. I want to go and find something that does take a bit of athletic ability, if you will, running across hills or mountains, jumping over ravines, getting into rivers. That's where you're putting yourself out there. And that probably is my sense of identity, is that's what I can offer maybe the photographic world, is I can do that. I've been an athlete. I know how to put myself in those situations. So, hopefully that somewhat answers the question.
And it raises another one, which is, in all these images, there's a huge amount of empathy. And I particularly, I kind of want the soundbite on this project you're working on at the moment in the slums in South Africa. But I also want to talk more generally about your ability to empathize with your subject. So I look at these images of bears in Alaska, and they have characters. They seem forlorn. They seem at risk. They seem endangered. Like, all those things are in a single picture of this bear that you have walking through a river, and it's it's heavy with the weight of its own fur being wet. Like, there is so much empathy in that composition. And I see that in every bit of your work, whether it's a landscape or a portrait or anything. I think you have the ability to see through people and places and things better than the rest of us. And then you somehow capture that. That's a very long-winded way of saying, I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about why you are, like, you're literally risking your life to go into these slums in South Africa. And the first time you told me about it, I was like, huh? Can you please be careful? That doesn't look like that. So first, just set up that project for us. What is this about?
In some ways, it's a kind of homecoming. I've had a 20-year professional career in the UK. And yeah, there's been a lot of emotion put into that career. At times, that emotion has really overstepped the mark in terms of it being a job, it being a career, but also being a passion. And I think my desperation to succeed sometimes did overstep that mark. And I don't think I always got the intensity right. And much to my own demise at times, I probably put too much pressure on myself. And, that's been a journey in itself, as I said. And, there's definitely been a lot of emotion in my own family. And in myself. So I think that's just a part of who I am. You can either fight that, you can obviously try and work with it. And I think I've tried to realize now that emotion is something that I need to work with. It's something that I need to embrace. I've had a sister who had an accident about 15 years ago. She's now paralyzed in the wheelchair, and I've seen firsthand what it's done to my own family, and had to sort of try and navigate that. As well as my professional career. And I think it's taken a huge amount out of me, but I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I like to really connect with, the subjects, the subject matter, whether it be animals, whether it be people, whether it be a landscape. I think there's got to be something a bit more that comes from a deeper feeling. And, heading into Alaska, as you alluded to, sure, there's some wonderful, wildlife photographers out there who spend their life in the wild, in the bush, and take these amazing shots of a lion or a bear feeding on salmon. But I think for me, it wasn't just about that. It's also about, sort of the backdrop and the whole the entirety of that shot, and sort of trying to capture that bear's emotion in its background, and maybe a sense of individuality comes out in my photography. I like lone subjects. I like to see them in their landscape.
So can you talk specifically about this project of going into the slums and really recording a group of people who don't get pictured in society?
Yeah, I guess getting back to South Africa and getting out to some of these more rural locations and areas, does hark back to my upbringing, and having had a 20-year professional career in England and coming back to South Africa, it's a homecoming of sorts. I had a garden boy, a house boy, who was very much a part of our family for about 40 or 50 years. Going back to my dad's time and aunt and uncle, and he was a major part of my life and my career. I spent lots and lots of time with him every day. He became a best friend, and he threw a lot of cricket balls at me, and we had a lot of laughs. I'd spend evenings talking Zulu to him and learning that language. So for me, that was my connection to this country. And of course, I went overseas and I had this career. And coming back, it's my intention to go and see him again. I think he's about 90 years old now, so I'm not sure how much longer he has. And it's very important that I get back to see him, to go and integrate with him and his community. But I think that leads me on to going into some of these slum areas, because it's a way of giving voice to some people that perhaps don't have the voice that I've had or had the opportunities that I've had. And there's no doubt when you go in there, the colors, the textures, the corrugated eye, and the when the sun goes down, it just it comes alive, and the people are alive, and it's not just about the smiles. I suppose it's also about some of the difficulties, some of the harshness. There's a lot of contrast, there's a lot of juxtaposition, with me being in there, and also with the lives that they've had, and also with the surrounds. So there's a lot to take in, but it really does make me feel connected. It makes me feel alive, and it's something that I feel really connects me to the people here, and I can't wait to get back out there. I just it's something that I think there's a lot of interesting narratives that will come out of it.
It's a true passion project, right? It's so embedded. You can tell it when you talk about it, that it's so embedded in who you are as a person, which I hadn't realized at all. So thank you for sharing that. I guess I have one sort of sign-off question, which is a really tough one, because you could answer it a million different ways. But you're really active on Instagram, and you give so much to people that follow you. How do you see Instagram as a platform for you in particular? How do you transition from being that athlete with a huge identity and a huge following to now saying, well, hang on, everybody, I've got something else to say?
Yeah, I think towards the end of my cricket career, Instagram, came alive, social media came alive. And I guess for many, for a large part, it was quite hard to navigate, because the word distraction comes to mind. And that won't just be me speaking. I think a lot of people will know what I'm talking about, the hours spent on it. And I think in sport, I think that's become probably the biggest difficulty for a lot of professional athletes now, is to stay focused, not get too caught up in extraneous sort of, Instagram accounts or social media, etc. You can get very caught up in it. So part of me was quite interested in this platform because it was so visual. The photographers I follow, the artists that I follow, the travel accounts that I follow, are probably the mainstay of my Instagram sort of account, really. And I found it really therapeutic and exciting to make my own attractive account. I think I take quite a lot of pride in the photos I take, and also, having something that I hope is beautiful to look at. I don't think I was particularly interested in some of my day-to-day activities, but I think when I look at my own photography account, I hope it shows a little bit of a journey between my professional sporting career, but also how I've transitioned and some of the things that I've managed to see and do and experience, whether that be some of the elite players that I've played with, and some of the sort of behind the scenes places. But that was always what interested me as a sportsman, is trying to bring the fan closer to the player. And I ran a sort of behind the scenes, kind of online video diary of what players got up to behind the scenes. And I'm not saying I was a pioneer in that, but it was definitely something I did probably 13, 14 years ago, where, quite often as fans, we see these players as, these almighty kind of all-conquering superhumans, and actually that's far from the truth. We're as, fragile and as anyone else. We have the same self-doubts, we have the same mental health issues, we have the same pressures. And it obviously gets packaged in a way where people often just see the success story and see what we do, through a TV. And I wanted to make it a bit more real. I wanted to bring that fan closer to me as a person. What do I do on a day off? What do I think about? Where do I have my hair cut? Just simple things that, gave me something to put my mind into. But I think photography has probably been similar, in the sense that I kind of want to show that sort of closeness in terms of not only the photos I take, but how I get there and the story and the narrative behind it.
We love it. I love it. I hope that that people get behind you as a photographer in the same way that they did you as a cricketer. I don't think many people are blessed with being brilliant at two things in their life. But I believe that you are, and I'm super excited to be even at the beginning of the conversation with you and watching this happen. So thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. I really appreciate it. I think it's great to be able to talk about it. I think even just talking about it now, it kind of makes me realize what is important to me and how to sort of, navigate that story. And I hope that I can build on some of those strengths and, learn and get hopefully somewhere close to where I did as an athlete.
Thank you, Nick.